July is Black, Indigenous People of Color, BIPOC, Mental Health Awareness Month. And on this episode of EquiTEA, we'll delve into the intersection of mental health, the BIPOC community, and the criminal justice system. As we explore these issues, it's essential to examine the demographics of incarcerated individuals in Riverside County. In Riverside County, Hispanic Latinx individuals comprise half the population, while Black African Americans make up less than 10%. However, these marginalized groups face the highest rates of felony and misdemeanor arrests in the county between 2018 and 2022. During this time, Black African American men were 4 times more likely to be arrested for a felony compared to white men. Similarly, for Black African American women, they are 2.7 times more likely to be arrested compared to white women. This data raises concerns about racial disparities in the local criminal justice system. Incarceration can have profound and detrimental effects on an individual's psychological well-being. Inmates often experience a loss of identity, exposure to violence, and, in some cases, the isolating impact of solitary confinement. Not to mention, the physical environment itself can add immense stress. Concrete walls, limited natural light, and a lack of overall stimulation can take a serious toll on one's mental health. Another critical aspect to consider in the context of incarceration is recidivism. Recidivism refers to a new felony or misdemeanor conviction occurring within 3 years of re-entry into the community. It is important to consider as it reflects the effectiveness of rehabilitation programs such as Starting Over, Inc., sentencing policies, and social support structures. In Riverside County, the rate of recidivism between 2018 and 2019 was 17.6%. To give context to this number, other counties in California had rates that range from between 3 to 31%. As we reflect on these issues, it's crucial to understand the systemic challenges faced by current and formerly incarcerated individuals, particularly those from BIPOC communities. By acknowledging interconnectedness of mental health, racial disparities, and the criminal justice system, we can strive for more equality and compassionate approaches for those starting over.
Hello, welcome to EquiTEA Podcast, where we like to spill tea on equity. My name is Greg. I'm here with my co-host, Peter. And today we are with 2 amazing individuals from Starting Over, Javier Baños and Ivan Serrano. Javier, Ivan, pleasure having you guys here.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, guys. It's great having you guys here. We're definitely looking forward to this podcast. If you could just share a little bit about yourself, a little introduction, and just your background.
Okay, my name's Javier. Javier Baños was already said. Something about me is I just got out 8 months ago. I was incarcerated for 15 years. And my background is one that, was from an immigrant family. Grew up in a poverty and gang-infested neighborhood in Orange County. And, by the grace of God, I have transformed my life through some rough spells, we could say, and terrible decisions. I've come out stronger, and I've come out a transformed individual. And so that's something we want to share with the community, and that's something that I've stressed today that I want to give back. And I'm actually an employee with the transitional home organization called Starting Over. And at first, when I first came out, they were the ones that gave me an opportunity, right? They were the ones that gave me housing to transition back into society because it can be difficult. And now I'm an employee by them. So I'm a peer support specialist, and I'm giving back to my community and those who have experienced things the same way I did.
That's cool, man. And congratulations on that. And that's awesome just to give back to community. How about you, Ivan?
So my background is also similar to Javier's. I was brought up in East LA, where gangs were also on every corner, and made several bad decisions. I grew up in poverty, so there was a lot of different dynamics that was going on in my life at that time. But I made a lot of bad decisions, got involved in gangs, and eventually I ended up committing my life crime. Ended up in prison for several years. I started preparing while I was in there, and I did a little bit of work with the youth in there. So that kind of opened my eyes into this line of work, which I am now, as peer support for starting over, and been loving it ever since.
That's wonderful. Javier, let me address this question to you first. What's the mission for starting over, and how did you get involved with it?
The mission for starting over is to help those who have been, I would say, affected by poverty, which includes homelessness and incarceration. One of the main things is reentry. They stress reentry, and I got involved with it, as I mentioned, directly because I was in the transitional home program. Starting Over has 12 transitional homes throughout LA area, San Jacinto area, Hemet. They have some in Eastville, Corona. We have multiple houses for individuals who have been affected by not just that, but also formerly addicts. So that's how I got involved with them, and just happy to be a part of the team now.
That's a lot of locations. What's your day-to-day? Do you go travel from location to location? How's that work?
Yeah, actually, we go directly to the individuals, and there's nothing like having that one-on-one, face-to-face connection with somebody. And the best thing about it is, one thing that I like, one of my mentors mentions that we weren't hired for our degrees necessarily. We were hired for our life experience, because the peer support has to have that life experience in order to be able to provide that relatable experience to the person. Because I've had the opportunity to conversate with different people, and until I get to the point that I let them know, like, hey, look, I was formerly incarcerated. And when I let them know that I was there for a little bit longer, they have a different perspective, and they're more willing to open up, because they feel like, man, he's one of us. And so I love that experience. But my day-to-day is basically, Monday, we went to LA. We went to Long Beach, Lakewood, different areas. We have 3 different houses over there. And throughout the week, we visit different houses. We're assigned different houses, and we have support that we give to specific individuals. And every week is just a rewarding experience, I should say.
Mm-hmm. And Yvonne, I know Javier, you're able to talk on the life experiences and the connection, and how that's important to be able to connect to others, especially as a peer support specialist. If you could also share that experience, Yvonne, and how you see why those life experiences is beneficial in being able to connect with others.
Okay, so my experience with dealing with people in our transitional housings, I've seen it firsthand when I was working with the youth in prison. So I knew that the connection had to be there before there was any mentoring or advice given, because if not, they kind of have the mindset of like, well, how can you give me advice if you've never been where I've been, So once I seen that, they knew, like Javier was saying, once I acknowledged that I was formerly incarcerated, they took a step back and started hearing me out, and I started talking to them about like, what was your challenges or gonna be your challenges as far as reintegrating into society. And I would explain my challenges. If they were a little bit on the quiet side, I would start first and I would explain my challenges. So that built the trust and the open communication between us. So one thing that our organization has that is unique is the peer support and case management, because there's no other peer support hardly in any other organization. So we work with the individuals as soon as they are upon release. We work with them and we start to find out their challenges and we start to address them together. So it's on, like Javier said, it's on a personal level. So I find it very rewarding at the end of the day. And my schedule also varies. Mondays we go to LA housings. We have 3 houses out there. 2 women's, 1 man. And our supervisor actually does the women, because we all know women find it easier to open up with other women instead of men. So it's the same thing with the men. We always try to have men either facilitate groups or being peer support or case management. And on Wednesdays, as a matter of fact, today, I actually drive out to San Jacinto, where I have oversee 2 houses, 1 woman and 1 men's house. And they're all different as far as the people I serve, and they all have their different challenges. So, but I'm always up for it because I get that personal satisfaction of just helping someone and knowing that I helped them out on a very critical day that they were having. So it's very rewarding to me.
And that's the great thing about it, to have those services available and have that experiences where you can feel that rewarding feeling. Is there any other unique programs or other programs part of Starting Over?
I could speak to that. I would say, like tonight, for example, we have something that's new for our community. Me and Ivan, we were released because we went to the Board of Parole hearing, and that's commissioners assigned by the governor of California, and we were granted release. Right? He was he had a life sentence. I had a 25-year sentence. So, and I only did 15 on that. And he would never get out if it weren't for that opportunity of second chances, and by the grace of God and this opportunity, we met all the requirements of transformation, right? And one of the things that process entails is it's very stressful. It's very emotionally draining, right? For the individuals who have to go through that process and their loved ones, because they suffer along with them. When one is incarcerated, your loved ones are incarcerated with you, because they're there supporting you, missing you. There's a chair right there, and whenever they have a birthday party, whatever it is, and I would say like a family gathering, and they're missing you. You're not there being a part of it. So it's hard on the family. So what we do, like tonight, we have what is called the Family Parole Board Prep Workshop. It's a long name, but it's basically directed to the families of those who have loved ones who are about to go through that process in prison. And we're directing the attention to the families themselves. Like, what was it, a couple weeks ago, we touched on the subject of self-care. And, a lot of things that we have to learn is relapse prevention for when we're in there and we present it to the commissioners. And we stress the importance of like knowing yourself, knowing your triggers, right? Whether it's for anger, whether it's for substance, whatever's your problem, whatever is your go-to. And we share that with the family members. And it's amazing because they're like, we need this help. We need this. This is like therapeutic for us. And we're so amazed by the response we get, and we're blessed for it, right? I feel like it's so rewarding because we're able to help them and we're able to help their loved ones through them as well. And another opportunity we have is that these individuals call us from prisons. I specifically talk to them and I help them through the process because I'm providing peer support to individuals in prison too. Right? And because I can relate. And it's amazing because like he said, it's rewarding. Once they talk to him, they're like, what? How long were you in prison? I'm like, yeah, I was there too, bro. I went through the same process you're about to go through. I know where you're at, I know the shoes you stand in. I was there and I can relate and I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. And that response I get is amazing. And I'm telling you, it's beyond words.
No, it must be, especially it's so comforting to know
absolutely,
that,
Absolutely agree with you guys. I think mentoring, right? If it's you guys, when you do the peer-to-peer, one-to-ones, it's best when the mentor, right, has gone through the whole process, so you can explain it, and that's totally relatable. But let me get to this real quick. How does incarceration, right, affect an individual's mental health? Okay.
So that right there is very complicated subject, because in prison, at some point, we didn't have all these groups that we do now for mental health that address the mental health state of individuals. And if they don't address it upon their release, they fall back into that mental state and then continue on with whatever they were doing before they were released, whether it's substance abuse, alcohol abuse, or criminal activity. So if these mental issues are not addressed, they can relapse back and fall back into being incarcerated again because their mental state hasn't been addressed, right? And the long-term effects of these mental health not being addressed is that for a lot of people it's different, right? Like for me, it's just I've addressed my mental health through different groups and in prison and out here that deal with it on a group session. So it's easier for me. It's easier for me that way. I could deal with it in that form. But for others, it has to be that one-on-one, or else they're not going to relate and they're not going to advance on their mental health stage, right? But long-term effects can definitely is real, you know, because if they don't continue that process to address their mental health, at some point or another, they can relapse. You know, so a lot of the times when we're in groups, we like to tell all the participants that this is a lifelong commitment, because it has to be that way. At one point or another, like Javier was talking about earlier, there could be something in your daily life that can trigger you and then trigger them thoughts. And you can start thinking about, oh, I remember this time and I wasn't given any help, or so on. And now it's all these combinations and factors that are go into that mental stage that they can either identify and move forward or identify and relapse. You know, so that's very important. Now, institutions are having a lot more programs and funding for it. So I could see we're heading in a good direction.
You know, I had a little follow-up question to that when it comes to those services now. When those services weren't there, was there ever a point in time that one felt like they had to be in survivor mode, or maybe felt a little fear to show that they had some sort of mental health?
I would say it's a different world in there, right? We would always mention this like day and night, because you do have to constantly live in survival mode. And that will do a number on you, you know, mentally. It is said that, you know, people who have long-term sentences and serve a long time, especially like in segregated units, are automatically diagnosed with PTSD, right? So, and I could relate in the aspect of like being hypervigilant at times, right? Or like he said, like things that will trigger flashbacks, right? Or just loud noises, and even like to some extent at times, like I personally experienced like a form of social anxiety, I would say. You know, I feel anxious in large groups, and I'm always like watching behind me. So that is, you know, obviously a repercussion, or I would say, of something that I've experienced, you know, throughout my incarceration. I had to constantly live in that state, and that is very stressful, all right? And so at times, you know, I have to remind myself of that, you know, I have to practice self-care, meditate, you know, my go-to coping skills. Even deep breathing techniques, those really work, right? Like it sounds like real simple, but they work, okay? They work.
A lifesaver.
Absolutely. One of the things I remember just driving when I first got out, and I was driving, and things I experienced, it's like doing everything all over again. It's brand new. It's like your mind and your body got adapted and got used to a certain way of living and forgot about this. So it's like you have to reprogram yourself, and it's amazing because I felt like, man, I've gone through all this. I mean, I know how to drive. I've driven before. I've gone through these events. I've gone to these places where there's large groups of people, just like Costco.
Yeah.
Right? But for me, Costco was a whole different, it took on a whole different meaning, a whole different feeling, right? When I would go in there, like different places like that, because I felt overwhelmed at times, right? And that's what it does to the body. And a lot of individuals, I would say, become what they term institutionalized. And we were just talking to somebody who has experienced that with a loved one. That individual did about 30 years. He came out and he still does a lot of the things he was doing in there, like little habits, and even waking up at the same time and like working out a lot, because we have plenty of time to work out and do things in there. Well, they're still doing it, but it's as if they forgot they're no longer there. So they're stuck in that mode, right? And we have to break away from that thankfully, like Ivan was mentioning, we've been able to break away from that slowly. There's traces of it that we won't ever shake, but we see those as like learning lessons, right? And things to be aware of, like, look, this is where we came, this is what we've been through, and now we're here. Thank God, and now let's move forward. Let's never jeopardize what we have today, so we won't go back to that.
Would you say, like in regards to like moving forward, do you ever feel that sometimes society, sometimes like still judges one's past, and it feels like, man, like how am I supposed to move forward when you guys keep on looking at my past mistakes and then like I did that time? Or do you ever feel that before? Like, or is that?
I think that's like a self-awareness, right? And a lot of times I've talked to certain individuals and they have the thinking in their head like, oh, people are not going to treat me the way I should be treated, or they're not going to be nice to me because I've been in prison, you know? And I've talked to individuals, it's like, wait a minute, people don't know you've been in prison. So that's an assumption that you're already making in your head to detach yourself from the community. Don't think that way because they don't know that, you know what I mean? So just carry on as if you are part of the community for one, and they don't know if you've been in prison or not. So don't assume, don't act different, just, you know, fall right into place, you know. And definitely, for me, it's funny because when he was talking about it, I was remembering my first days out, and it did come into play in my mind, like, and then I had to rethink it. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have a sign on me that says I just got out of prison, you know what I mean? So how are people gonna know? So I just started, you know, integrating back into the community and just being myself, you know?
Well, you know, it's very admirable hearing that because like, it just shows like how both of you guys are so brave to be like, you know what, like, I'm gonna start over, I'm gonna do this, and like, yeah, that's really admirable because I'm sure, like, you know, sometimes to go through all that stuff. Little question, and how sometimes I could, like, question I was gonna ask now is how sometimes that could also impact like families and everything. So how does incarceration impact families, communities, and particularly when it comes to emotional and financial well-being?
Well, I know for sure my family was very affected in a negative sense because for one, we'll start emotionally. You know, as I was speaking earlier, I remember talking to my mom on a collect call from prison and hearing her say like, oh, we're out here eating, and she wouldn't even want to say what they were eating because she felt bad. She felt like guilty, like, I'm enjoying this food, I'm enjoying your favorite dish, and, you know, I don't feel like I should, like, it would take joy away from her. Right? And I felt terrible about that. I'm like, no, don't. But I was able to let them know, like, tell me everything. I want to know everything. I was like, I know I'll get my time. I know I will come back, and one day I'll experience that again. You know, one day I'll eat with you. One day I'll be sitting right there next to you, hugging you, right? And letting you know, Mom, I love you. I'm here. Yeah. We're a family again, right? And so it affected her a lot. My mother, most of all. My father, you know, he went through a lot as well. You know, he was never depressed. He started suffering from depression. And I felt terrible about that. So the emotional effect, that's a long-term effect, right? Negative effect. And that we term it the ripple effect. It doesn't only affect our families. I mean, through our crimes, I mean, we were incarcerated for something we did, we were guilty of. And, you know, although it was a terrible choice, you know, and we wish we could take things back and change and make amends, we know there's a lot that can't be taken back. And the effects of that are gonna hit our community financially. I mean, just to house us in prison, you know, you can think about that, the financial impact. And then on the family, on our end, you know, just to be able to provide for us while we're in there throughout the years, that's a lot. Right, and well, let's not forget the individuals who were directly impacted by the crime, the victims. You know, they have to go through so much, and then the trauma afterwards, and the therapy, you know, the medical bills, everything. And the police officers and in our community who have to deal with that and see that they're not immune to emotions, right? They see that they're also traumatized by that, right? And we've negatively affected, and impacted our communities. And now what we're trying to do is turn it around in some way. I know like I said, we can't take things back. What we did is done, and the effects, we could try to do our best from this point forward, make amends, right? Give back and make it our mission and our life goal. Mine personally is to give back, to honor the lives of those I've hurt, right? And from this point forward, just to be a beacon of hope, if I can, in a little sense, right? And help in any way possible and give back to the community in that way.
Ivan, I know you touched on this in our last question, but what are some of the common challenges that formerly incarcerated individuals face upon reintegration, right, into the community? But how does starting over address those challenges?
Well, so there are a lot of common challenges for what I've seen, and on a personal level, it was always the access to resources and not knowing where to begin. And so I ended up with Starting Over Inc. and did their transitional housing program. And like I mentioned before, they have peer support and case management. So what peer support helped me navigate, have someone to talk to just about the everyday life now, being back part of my family for so many years. I spent 25 years in prison, and so the institutions I was in, they were so far that my family at some times financially couldn't be there, right? So that caused a drift in our relationship. So at some points it felt awkward being in the visiting room, and I had my mom, my sister, and I feel like there's no connection, and that's where it comes from, because these institutions are so far away. Now the financial aspect of it, it makes it harder for them to visit, right? So having a peer support actually helped me navigate these feelings as far as what I was feeling. And I open up. I'm not that person I used to be, where I kept my feelings to myself and bottled up. And what I've learned through my recovery is that is harmful to you, the community, and your family members, because at some point, the best analogy I could share with is like having the soda, and you shake it up and it's holding all the pressure in, and then at one point you open it and it just bursts out, instead of just being all calm, and whenever you open it, it's calm. So it's the same thing, sharing your experiences or your feelings with peer support can ease these intense feelings and uncertainties that I had while I was being released and upon my release. So I was able to talk to my peer support one-on-one, and even though it was a female, I still had that comfort level in sharing, because sometimes men want to share their most intimate feelings with another man because they feel a lot more comfortable. But to me, that wasn't an issue, and I was able to share. And she was, at that point, I just needed someone to listen and hear me out. Or sometimes I did need a little advice, even though I already knew, like, I need to do this to make this situation. Like, for example, I have a son that's 26 years old, and I was never there for him. I was never that father figure that he needed. So now he held all this resentment for all these years. And my thing is always staying in contact with him, calling him every now and then, and trying to reconnect with him and get over his issues. And from what I've learned from my experience, it's never my place to tell him, like, hey, you need to move past this. That's not for me to say. That's for him at his own time to move forward when he's right and ready. And that's one thing that I've learned, people that have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives. This was very traumatic in his life, and I understand it. So I give him his time, his space, and whenever he's ready to fully have a father and son relationship, I'm gonna be there. So peer support definitely helped me out a lot. Case management, having the resources brought to me and say like, hey, what do you need? You need your ID, your birth certificate. I was like, yes, where do we start? And she'd have her laptop and we'd get started. And that made it so much easier. If I didn't have that, I would have to take it upon myself to do it and figure these things out. And we now know without a cell phone, it's like really impossible to do anything now. And so once I got my cell phone, I was able to, get the things that I needed to get done, work on my resume and get back in the workforce. I think me being part of starting over really changed my life because it opened doors, opportunities, and definitely brought a lot of resources to me that I think that if I would have went to another organization or transitional housing, I think I would have been limited, and it would have took me a little longer for me to get where I am at today.
At the beginning of the program, though, did you like fully immerse yourself into it? Did you buy into it at first, or did it take you some time?
Yes, it was a slow transition. Because I was barely getting the sense of being part of the community again and starting to think about how am I going to start and can they really help me in moving forward? So we always have these self-doubts, like, can really someone help me out, And after we build them connections, I was able to see that they can,
Out of my curiosity, though, give me a time frame. Like, how long was it? Like months? Was it a couple of years when you fully like bought into the system to help you?
I think it was about a month and a half.
Oh, that's not. Yeah. That's fairly quick, I think.
That is. It's very. It was very quick, and me and Javier were released upon the community maybe about the same time. So I have about 8 months also. So. Some of the friends at the transitional housing were like, we'd see at the pace that they were moving, but me and Javier had a different
roommates.
pace. Yes. So we had a different pace.
Literally together.
We were literally together same week. Yes. I got out, I believe, I was released on a Wednesday. He was released on a Saturday.
Okay.
And we were together the following week. We were together at the transitional home and we became roommates. And it was a lot. It was amazing because not everybody there had done like a long-term sentence, and so we could relate on a different level because somebody who has done a long time has acquired, I would say, like a sense of structure and a sense of like certain habits, right? We're very clean. We're very clean. We're like neat freaks, and we like to get things done. We don't sit around and wait for others, or we take the initiative. Because we and then especially because we went through the process of like the board of parole hearing process, that took a lot of work. It's way harder than college, I would say, because I took college and it's way harder than college. Why? Because it's emotionally draining and you have to bring up old traumas. Nobody wants to go back to that. So it takes a lot of work, right? And because we can relate on that level, it was like a whole different experience. When we came out, we're like, oh, right off the bat, we connect and we're like, yeah. I was like, we're roommates. We're for sure
so
roommates.
We were also relying on each other when I didn't have that peer support there and I didn't have that cell phone to just call them up and be like, hey, I got something to talk to you about. I would always talk to about with Javier and be like, is it this the same for you? And like we were trying to find employment and we're like, man, bro, I'm getting like a little upset at myself because I can't find a job, and he was going through the same thing.
Because you set expectations for yourself, and when they're not met, going back to like what you mentioned earlier, sometimes like the stigma, like society imposes upon us, or different organizations, they don't say necessarily out front, like, oh, you know what, we're not gonna hire you because you're a felon, but we know we're qualified. Right? We have the skills, we might even have certifications, but yet we don't get the job. And we stay wondering like, And it becomes a pattern. I mean, time after time, interview after interview, and application after application, you're like, well, when is it gonna happen? Because it became frustrating. We were like, well, bro, by now we should have had a job. Like,
Right.
what's
And
going
I remember
on?
that conversation because, we were talking about it, and I was like, you know what? But we got to be patient. And my mindfulness of being patient and just leaving it in God's hands. Like I left a lot of things in God's hands, and like he said, we had to do 10 times harder work on ourselves in our foundation and our core, because I could have a conversation with anyone and I can see where they're at as far as their core values, and a lot of times when I talk to other people at the housing as far as being peer support, that's what I want to know first is where are you at in your life, because everyone's in different stages. But like Javier mentioned earlier, we had to do a lot of hard work as far as breaking down our core foundation, which false beliefs, and replace them with positive and spiritual beliefs and live by them. A lot of people can know what you need to do, but if you don't internalize it and you don't live it, then you're not really changing, and that's the hard part. And a lot of people just give up because it's so hard to do. It's like relearning how to live life again, but the way you should have lived from the beginning until you started picking up these bad habits, making bad choices in your life, right? So that's why it was easy for me to stay on track because of my new beliefs and core foundation that I restructured in spiritual principles and doing good. And I know that I caused a lot of harm, like in my community, and all these things that I now understand is like, it brings me like, it's sad, but that's kind of what drives me to even help out the people that are struggling in this lifestyle, right? And I remember one of my groups, and it was that we were talking about this, that we're focusing in on changing our lives, because if there's one less criminal, there's one less crime, right? And we don't want people that are in prison getting out the same as they went in, right? We want them getting out and having a better mindset, goal-oriented, so that when they get out, they're successful. But definitely it wasn't easy, but it's if we can do it, anyone can do it.
That was the pure definition of the buddy system, right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
No, and that's so.
That was amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
The fact that you guys hey, we came out together, but similar experiences in the aspect of the long-term sentence, and then to come out and be like, oh, okay, we have these similar habits compared to others, but at the same time, and being able to be roommates, it was like that was best friends.
In that sense, that was something that.
And
that
we even
helped
talked
us.
about it too. We were like, man, wouldn't it be when we put in the application, and then I found out he put in an application too for starting over, and I was like, man, it would be so awesome if we worked together, and here we are. We work together.
And that's cool, and that's definitely. God works in miraculous ways,
He does.
And life is just always, things happen in life, and I always sometimes we joke around and say it's a wonderful thing, but I really feel like things like this or where things happen it's always a beautiful thing to see. And what do you believe that when it comes to root causes that can lead individuals to certain behaviors and lifestyles? I know recently, before we talked about insight, if you could just add a little bit more on that.
Okay, root causes, I would say, for me, something that was an underlying factor for, a lot of my terrible choices. The terrible choices that I make was abandonment, abandonment, rejection, and neglect as a child. So it starts at the home. You always have to take it back and start at the house, right, with the parenting. I'm not saying that I had bad parenting. My parents are great, but sometimes they give us what they were given. Put it that way. They deal with life and with bringing up a child the way they were taught. And it doesn't necessarily mean it was something good. So it becomes a cycle. And abandonment to me wasn't necessarily always in the physical form, like they weren't there for me, or physically. It could also be emotionally. Neglect, the same way. I experienced emotional neglect. It wasn't in a physical sense because I was well fed, but it was just not being emotionally available for me when I needed them. I would come from home and I would feel, I don't know, I was getting bullied. I was going through something. I couldn't make friends. And I wanted to express that to my family, that I felt rejected. And they didn't know how to deal with it, or they were too busy to deal with it. And so that was a form of abandonment and neglect to me. My father, like many immigrant parents, wanted to give his child and all his children what he didn't have growing up. That's common. We always hear that. Right? And so what did he do? He would spend his whole day working, day and night. Right? So I would rarely see my dad. When I would see him, he would be asleep. And I would go to school. So that really had a negative impact on me. Right? And then feeling like I was, I would say, not socially accepted, right? I felt rejected as a child. I felt different, and that had a negative impact on my self-esteem. Those things trickled down, right? I felt that sense of hurt and pain and rejection eventually turned into like a sense of frustration and anger, right? And I was mad at the world for a long time, and I took it out on others, That's how I became the person I was, and ultimately committed a crime that led me to a 25-year sentence. But that right there, what I just explained to you, is like the core foundation of insight. Insight is just looking further into your life, and the answer is always within us. So when I ask you, for example, if I ask you personally, give me some insight into your life, where did it all start? You had to take it to your childhood. So me and Ivan, we had to learn, and many other individuals, we had to learn that thing through the board process. Because you have to basically dissect your life, make like a sort of timeline, and bring it back all the way to where you were a child. And you felt certain feelings, you started incorporating certain habits, and you took upon yourself certain beliefs, your life perspective, right? And that has to do with, distorted beliefs sometimes. Like, if this is done to me, I react this way, right? A healthy belief is, you deal with it in a healthy way. But for me personally, it became like you deal with it bursting out in anger and aggressively, for example, and that had a negative impact on me. And addressing these things, I would say, at the core is how you nip it in the bud. Let's put it that way. So abandonment, rejection, and neglect. Even one that's very common, was common for me, was a form of domestic violence. Remember, domestic violence doesn't necessarily have to be physical. Verbal, emotional, mental, that's the worst. Because that takes a long negative impact. That creates a long negative impact in your life. And traces of that you carry up until adulthood. And I know I did, because I acted out on all that. And I had incorporated those beliefs early on, and I lived with them for so long. And they were distorted because of the things that I've had experienced. So understanding that, helps us address the problem, I would say, because it starts at the house. It starts at the home with the parenting. So we should give more attention to our children. We should be more emotionally available. So one thing we do is we address that through our peer support, and we facilitate groups with families and the individuals who have experienced incarceration and homelessness directly, and even addiction. And what we do is we have a program called Ridding Yourself of Emotional Baggage, right? Addressing the emotional baggage you carry and how that's affected you. And the first step, as in many 12-step programs, is identify the problem first. Realize there's a problem, and that the problem lies within you, right? Because if you don't think, or you don't even realize there's a problem, then what's there to fix, right? You might be in denial. Everybody sees it but you. And that's sad, right? But the problem is, it starts with identifying that problem. Once you're able to do that, we're able to move forward and fix whatever is wrong. But it starts at the home. And so what we do is, in addition to that, we incorporate some parenting, I would say some parenting skills, right? Being emotionally available, spending time with your children, right? Letting them know, that their emotions are valid, whatever they're going through, and that it's going to be okay. Giving them that sense of reassurance and protection and security that a child and a human being needs, so they can grow and be successful, so they can have confidence in themselves, so they don't feel rejected, so they feel worthy, not unloved, because I know I felt unloved, right? And that's had a detrimental effect on me. But addressing those issues is where I would say, we can how we can fix the problem.
Another key factor in that I want to touch on is forgiveness. Like Javier touched on, our parents can only give us what their parents gave them. And understanding that, for me, I was able to forgive my parents and the people that raised me, and understanding they couldn't give me something that they didn't receive, right? So I had to forgive them and move past that, because that resentment, that hurt, that just was another contributing fire for me to make all the wrong decisions, never the right ones, because of that hurt and that pain. So once I was able to identify, like Javier says, all these domestic violence, everything that happened in my life as a child, once I identified, now I had to begin the forgiving process, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I want to be forgiven for my crimes that I committed. So who am I not to forgive my parents, the people that raised me, and for them lacking the knowledge of how to raise a child, right? So once I did it, everything just felt so much easier, so much better. And for me, everyday life, dealing with everyday people, just I could say now versus before, I'm quicker to forgive than to anger.
In what ways can you guys provide support, right? I think you kind of touched on this, but on a personal level.
I would say on a personal level, just connecting with people. A lot of times, there's practical help and financial help you can give, right? But there's nothing like what we've been touching on, the insight aspect, right? The traumatic aspect, the root causes of the problem lie within you and the emotional baggage you carry. And so we have to develop emotional resilience. And what do we do that? How do we do that? Is helping each other out, right? Like you mentioned earlier, which was funny, right? The buddy system. That was key for our transformation. That was key for our transition back into society. I think that if we didn't have that, it would have been a lot more difficult than what it was, right? And the transition wouldn't have been as smooth. It still continues. I'm not saying it like it's an everyday thing, but it has made it a lot simpler and smoother, because that support that is constant gives you that reassurance. So by providing that help, like the one-on-one peer support, for example, you connect with somebody and you let them know, I get you. I'm here for you. I know exactly what you're going through because I've been there, right? The other day I was having a conversation with somebody, and like I mentioned earlier, their whole reaction and like perspective of me changed, and they opened up once they knew like I came from the same place. Because at first, to them, they might be closed off, like, what do you know what I've been through? How can you relate? Like, you don't know, it's like from the outside looking in. But once they know you were in it, they open up. And so I think that's the best way we can help individuals, just making that one-on-one connection and letting them know I'm here for you, right? But being sincere about it, because anybody could try to fake something, but you can sense that in somebody. You can feel it. You know when somebody really cares. And when you know they care and they were there to help you and they're physically present, they demonstrate it, not just say it. Like they say, actions speak louder than words. That takes on a whole different effect. And I think that's how we can best help individuals.
And how can we show compassion to individuals who are starting over?
I think basically just like Javier touched on, talking to them, just treating them the same as you would treat any other person, showing them that they're no different based on their past, that I'm not going to treat you different based on your past, and them getting that sense of being welcomed back into the community is going to go a long way, because now they feel embraced again by the community. So there goes their first step, is their thought process, right? That ends that thought that, oh, I'm not going to be accepted back into my community because I committed these crimes, or I did this, or I did that. And that holds them back from reintegrating back into the community. Now they want to continue that antisocial mentality because of these little thoughts. But if you talk to someone on an everyday encounter, whether it's, out in the community or, out, getting groceries or whatever, and being polite and friendly with someone, that shows them that, we're embracing you back into our community. And that's going to put their first thought of, oh, they're not going to embrace me. That's going to end that. And I think that's always the big, the first step is always the biggest step.
I wanted to touch on that compassion because I was taught, sympathy is looking from the outside and feeling bad for someone, right? Oh, that's sad. I have pity for that person. Empathy is a step further. Empathy is putting yourself in that person's shoes, like, trying to experience what they're going through. But compassion is a step further, is putting those two first things that I mentioned, sympathy and empathy, together and acting on it, the action aspect of it. So, like he mentioned, small acts of kindness, being kind to people just on the road instead of road rage, right? Opening the door for someone at the store. Those small acts of kindness, can help. Just smiling and saying hello to somebody who might be having a bad day can make an impact on them in a good way. So compassion is taking a step further. Compassion involves action. So the best way we can help is by acting, helping those individuals, going out there, volunteering your time as well. And we have many events that, offer the opportunity for volunteering. We have a youth event that's coming up on July 27th. It's a peer support youth event, and it's directed solely for the youth who are struggling, who are maybe headed in the wrong direction, and we want to hopefully lead them away from that into the good direction, right? By example, showing them. And also, just providing that support, like we mentioned, whether it's through case management or peer support, that one-on-one, letting them know, I'm here for you.
How can our listeners support organizations like Starting Over and advocate for more equitable policies related to incarceration and reentry? So you have like a call to action as far as how to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say get involved. We have our website, startingoverinc.org, right, where you could be a part of it. This is a nonprofit organization, so the best way, one of the ways we can support them is by donating, providing donations. These organizations are ran through such donations and grants, and it's essential, right, for us to keep helping our communities, because this support that we're able to provide, I would say, is imperative. For us, me on a personal level, I know if it wasn't for that, it would have been a lot harder for me. If I knew I didn't have that support, who knows where I've been. And I see the other side sometimes, where people who don't have that support are in the streets, or are struggling, or have relapse, and that's sad. Right? So we have to. The call to action, I would say, entails being a part of it. Right, attending these. We have the workshop every other Wednesday. We have the workshop for the families of those who have incarcerated individuals who are going through the border parole process, and we provide support to them. And that's actually tonight from 6 to 8 at our office, Riverside office, Starting Over. So, and that happens every other week. Well, we have other events, reentry conferences. We also put together. We had one in Moreno Valley, what was it, like a couple months ago? Yeah, and we have individuals from different, whether it's a dean of certain colleges, whether it's assemblymen, people who are in doctor positions of I would say successful positions, people who have made something of themselves and are giving back to the community in a good way, or have other nonprofit organizations come together and share those resources. And we constantly come together with other organizations because we're not like, oh, I'm better than you, or it's just me, I'm gonna hold on to this like because, you know, I wanna stand out. No, that's not the point. The point is to give back. The point is not, look at me. It's to help out individuals, you know, just human kindness, out of human kindness. And just because not we're expecting something in return, but because that's how we should be. Right? He mentioned earlier, you know, basically, what is it? The golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. You want to be treated with kindness and love, so treat others the same way. And so we want to just stress that point. You know, give back and be a part of your community. Volunteer, and if you go to our website, you see all the events we're a part of.
And this here, you know, serving as a platform to get the word out, you know, and say starting over, doing great things in the community, and we will continue to do them with the support of the community.
Javier, Ivan, thank you so much for being here. It's definitely been a pleasure. Thank you for spilling the tea with us on EquiTEA. This has been the Equity Podcast.